What's up, everybody? We're back at it here, and we're taking our first look at this Lori Vallow Daybell trial. Last I checked, they are still in the jury selection phase. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about what it looks like in Idaho, and how they're moving along, how long this is supposed to take, how many jurors they're going to have, how many strikes they have. We're going to do all of that. I want to give a shout out to Nate Eaton, who has been putting out a lot of content on this. He's live tweeting in there. He's doing recaps if you want to check him out. He's not a lawyer. I think he's a reporter. I've played some of his videos in the past where he gives these little quick updates. So I've gotten some information from him, some information from a couple other people on Twitter, on YouTube, some other things that I just kind of have looked up in Idaho about how this process works. And there are some similarities to the most recent trial that we did, which was Alec Murdaugh. And then there are some very serious differences. And we are going to get to all of that and more. And then, of course, there's going to be a large portion here. If you have questions, we are going to answer them at the end of today's video. And also, along with the questions on this case, a lot of you reached out and wanted to talk a little bit about some of these recordings in the Letitia Stout case, because the prosecution has played some recordings. You guys want to know how that's going to affect insanity. So after this, we're going to redirect to a Letitia Stout trial Q&A and just talk about the recordings for a few minutes. Still going to be an hour. This one's probably going to be 40, 45 minutes. And then the next one we'll finish out the hour with. But this case is the focus of today. It's our first look into it. And a lot of people are saying Brian Enton. It's Nate Eaton, I think. I think it's Nate Eaton. Brian Enton, I know, and he's been on a lot of cases. I thought this one was Nate Eaton. He's like, I think he is like the Idaho guy. But of course, I could be wrong. So people can double check on that. So yeah, there are no cameras, John. Who cares? Nobody can follow. Well, it's still a pretty serious case, and there's still a lot going on. And there are recordings that are being produced the next day. So for those of you who are interested in this case, I am going to run through it a little bit today. I'll probably do more like weekly updates, not daily updates. Yes, it is Nate Eaton. I'll probably do more like weekly updates on this case and not daily updates. But they're picking a jury, and I've heard that over 2,000 people were considered for this. By the way, if you are not like John, who I know is going to be here, he's going to hang out, he's going to ask good questions, and you're going to see his name pop up with questions, I'm positive. But if you are still interested in this Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell saga in this case, hit that like button so that I can know. And if you guys are not interested, let me know in the comments like John. If you were with John O'Rourke on this one and you're out because there are no cameras, let me know. And we don't have to waste our time on it, and we don't have to continue to talk about it. But if you guys are interested, hit that like button, subscribe, because the plan is for now to do weekly updates. So about 2,000 people were considered in the jury pool. They sent out questionnaires. Hundreds of questionnaires came back. And like Murdaugh, they basically let hundreds of people go just based off of their questionnaire answers. That is not unusual in high-profile cases like this. Then, just like the Murdaugh case, they brought the jury potential jurors in phases or in groups for voir dire or voir dire. I saw Nate in one of his videos say he was mispronouncing it when he said voir dire. There are actually some lawyers that call it voir dire. I call it voir dire and voir dire. So there are multiple ways to pronounce it. I know people think I'm wrong about that, but I think that if in law school and in courtrooms across the country, it is pronounced both ways, then both ways are acceptable. That's where I sit on this one. So then they brought in them in waves. And as they bring them in waves, the judge asks general questions, just like in the Murdaugh cases. And then after the judge asks general questions, unlike the Murdaugh cases, the state and the defense attorneys get to ask questions. It is not a death penalty case. And in Murdaugh, if it was a death penalty case in South Carolina, according to Harpootlian, then we would have had this situation where they could have asked individual questions. So they are allowed to ask questions to the jurors. They're allowed to individually ask certain jurors questions at certain times throughout the voir dire process. And so that is a lot different, because when the lawyers are inserted in the process, you're going to hear a lot more digging is done. And I think it's a lot easier for the jurors to strike a chord or a light bulb to go off like, wow, maybe this actually isn't the right case for me. And I think that's important. That's important throughout the process for jurors to understand what's going on, what they're going to need to evaluate so that they can make an appropriate decision. A lot of dismissals that were made for hardships, like we heard in the Murdaugh case, jobs, families, illness, life. Apparently, Nate reported that the defense attorneys wanted a lot of mothers off because they're going to think, how could you possibly have done this to your kids? And even if it's not done this to your kids, just how could you ever not report them missing or do anything when they were reported missing? Those kind of issues. Ashley English is going to try to get back in the courtroom. Yes, I actually have had a bunch of people, and I considered taking a nice little vacation up to Idaho, up to Boise, getting an Airbnb, just chilling up there and sitting in this trial, but it did not work out. I'm way too busy this time of year. But Ashley and a lot of you are going to this trial. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at Tragos Law right here, I should say. If you want to shoot me any of your insights and I can add them to my recaps. So they're asking some very specific questions to the jurors, and we'll get to hear how lawyers get to come up with these questions and ask these questions to try to find explicit and implicit biases or reasons why the jurors might not be able to be fair and impartial. Judge Boyce is trying to push the pace. Lori Vallow is taking notes, and they had 17 of the potential pool picked after day 1, 30 after day 2. Last I checked, I think they were at somewhere between 35 and 40. They're going to continue to go until they get 42 potential jurors. Then they're going to bring them all in. And I don't know if they're going to ask more individual questions or just start to use their preemptory strikes at that point to get us to a panel of 18. 12 that would be on the jury and 6 alternates, because this trial is, I think, going to be 7 or 8 weeks total. Based on what Nate was saying, they are planning and hoping to have a jury by the end of the day today. They may even start opening statements today. I think it's more likely they'll start opening statements tomorrow. I heard some kind of a schedule like 8:30 to 3:30, which would be wild. That seems like a very short schedule, but maybe that allows the court to still have some hearings in the afternoon. That allows the state to continue handling some other cases in the afternoon, and maybe even the defense to go back and continue to work on their other cases, which I think is good and respectable, to allow everyone to continue their jobs over a 7 to 8 week trial and not have to just stop everything. Even though it's state attorney and public defender involved, they have other cases and other clients as well. All right. So let's talk about strikes real quick. Each side, so I said they're going to go to 42 jurors and they're going to end up with 18, which leaves 24 jurors. Well, if you were to guess how many strikes each side has, they each have 12 preemptory strikes. Now, what I'm interested in, because that's what it's been reported, I didn't look this up, but are any of those strikes for alternate jurors? Because in Florida, we have an alternate strike, but if you look at the case law, they're all considered the same strikes, which may just be what it is there in Idaho, where they just have 12 strikes. So it seems like each side has 12 strikes for any non-discriminatory reason that they can use on those 42 jurors. And if each side decides to use all of their strikes, we'll be left with 18. They don't have to use all of their strikes. If the defense wants to protect an appellate issue on the record, then they will have to use all their strikes, and they'll have to actually ask for another strike if they believe someone should be struck that was not struck. But it seems like once we get down to 42, there will not be any more cause challenges. If you have a cause challenge, they're having the arguments now, and Boyce is making a decision. He has granted some of them. He has overruled some of them. Some, especially that the defense wanted out for cause, he has allowed to be in this panel of 42 that they will potentially pick for this jury. I see that Azam is gifting more memberships, being generous as she often is. So thank you, Azam. So a strike, Azam, that's a good question. A strike is when you want a juror off. So if I say Azam is not going to be a good juror for this case, I'm going to use a preemptory strike on Azam. Well, that's okay. Unless the other side thinks I'm striking all of the women off of the panel. And they can say, why don't you want Azam is it some other reason that she's a woman? And I have to give a gender neutral reason why I would strike Azam. And there are other protected classes, as everybody knows, in America, but that is just an example of one. So you are allowed to use that preemptory strike because I can say, Azam really seems like because she's a teacher, I don't think they would look at this case the right way and they'd be bad for my client who's also a teacher or who's accused of battering a teacher, whatever it may be. So there are different reasons why you can strike people, and you're allowed to strike them because you can be like, I didn't like the way they were looking at my client. Or you can strike them because they have a family member who's in law enforcement. And Shaylin asked, can you block a strike? You can do what I just said and say, hey, I think they're using their preemptory strike on a protected class, which in this case, one of the big talking points is the LDS faith or religion. And people have asked, can you strike people that are in the Church of the Latter-day Saints? And the answer is no, because that is religious beliefs is a protected class. So you can't strike for that reason. Now, you can strike because you'll say, I think they know too much about this case, or maybe they've read Chad Daybell's book or things like that. So yeah, Lori, no, you cannot block from religious affiliations. So Shaylin, the way that you can try to block a preemptory strike is to say that you think they're doing it to a protected class or because somebody is part of a protected class. If they can prove to the judge that they're not, which means gives basically any non-discriminatory reason. And if they can give a non-discriminatory reason, then you can't block that strike, because preemptory strikes are supposed to be basically, there's something you don't like about that juror. It can be as simple as, my client doesn't like them, judge. He doesn't like the way they're looking. He doesn't like the way they're acting through the process. They're not taking it seriously enough. They're taking it too seriously, whatever it may be. All right. So here's some other reasons that the questions are getting to why people are being struck or having further questions. Number one, knowing details about the case. Number two, watching the Netflix documentary. Number three, just knowing about the Netflix documentary. Thanks a lot, Netflix, right? Media consumption. What media do you consume? And them saying like they've just been covering so much of this case, there's no way they don't know about this case if they're consuming that kind of media. Another one, there's a person that minored in religious studies. So you're not necessarily striking them because of their religious affiliation, but because their educational background, maybe they'll know something about this case or about the Latter-day Saints that may affect them, that they won't just listen to the evidence, but they'll bring something else in. Maybe they've read Chad Daybell's book. That's another one. There was an author that was questioned further as, have you ever read Chad Daybell's book? Knowing that he's an author of many books, would that affect your ability to be fair and impartial? If the answer to that was yes, that because she's an author, she wouldn't be able to be fair and impartial, that would be a challenge or a strike for cause. Anybody that cannot be fair and impartial cannot be on the jury. So those are some of the reasons that the prosecutors are really digging in on. What do you know about the case? What do you know about Lori Vallow? What do you think? Do you have preconceived notions? But then a very interesting subject matter that the prosecution has been allowed to go into. Some people and some defense attorneys, and I probably would, object to this as pre-trying the case. You're not allowed to say things like, if we produce a police officer that says X, Y, and Z, would you be able to convict? You can't say things like that. But the prosecutors are towing the line between what is legally permissible or what is the law, and can you follow the law even if you disagree with it? That's a fair question. Even if you disagree with the law, can you still follow it if the judge instructs you to? Of course, that's a great question. But they are starting to ask, this is a murder case. Would you be able to find that a murder occurred if we cannot prove to you a cause of death, or we do not know how the victim died? Would you need that in order to convict somebody of this crime? Now, I assume, obviously I'm not watching it and I'm not listening to 8 hours of audio at this point. I heard that they're not even out with the first day of audio yet, and they're supposed to have them out every 24 hours, but neither here nor there. I would object that this is pre-trying the case and that the jury doesn't necessarily know what evidence they need to convict somebody, but that it does need to be beyond a reasonable doubt. However, the prosecution in their response would be the law does not require a cause of death. Cause of death is not one of the elements of murder. You do have to prove that someone died, which in some cases, and one of them, me and Pete are going to be talking about in a podcast coming up, but you do have to prove that someone died, and they can prove that in this case, but not cause of death. So that is an interesting line to walk, and the judge is allowing the prosecution to get into that, which means that theoretically all the jurors that end up on this panel will be able to find someone guilty of murder. Doesn't mean that it's Lori Vallow, but without knowing the cause of death or how the victim died. So that to me is pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. They also asked, and again, this brings back flashbacks to Alec Murdaugh, can you convict wholly on circumstantial evidence? And there's been discussion of circumstantial evidence versus direct evidence. They've used a crumb on a child's mouth. You know, if there's crumbs all over here, can you still prove that they were eating a cookie versus do you have to actually see them eat the cookie? I also have a feeling if we do end up following this case, that there is going to be a heck of a lot more circumstantial evidence from what we've seen in the preliminary hearing and seen through the documents and the interviews in this case than there was in the Murdaugh case. And so if it was possible to convict on the circumstantial evidence in the Murdaugh case, I think it's absolutely even a higher likelihood that they can convict based on what we expect the circumstantial evidence to be in this case. But we haven't seen it yet, so she is presumed innocent. Another difficult line of questioning that they went down was the autopsy photos of the children. That there will be some. Can you make it through that? Can you make it through that with impartiality? Is because of how bad those photos are, you're going to want justice? Is it just going to make you more likely to convict? Difficult questions like that. Another interesting tidbit here is John Pryor, Chad Daybell's lawyer, is attending the trial. I think they all have to sit in a separate room right now. I'm not 100% positive if it's just media or how it's all working of who's sitting in what room. I know the media is watching a monitor, but he is watching this trial, getting a bit of a preview of what's to come for his client. He's technically a member of the public, and the judge is apparently allowing it, and it's fair game. I don't see any reason why not, because he could, in a normal situation, if he has a co-defendant, he could order the transcript if he doesn't want to actually sit at the trial, and he can impeach these witnesses if their testimony changes between now and Chad Daybell's trial. This is an under oath statement. These are statements that can be used to impeach other witnesses as inconsistent statements or consistent statements. And that to me is very interesting. Very, very interesting. So people are saying that John Pryor's in the media room. Okay. I'm going to answer some of your questions now. And then before we finish the video, I am going to look at Nate's Twitter and see if we have any updates. Ashling, Peter, I was flying back to Ireland from Miami, was downloading your live to rewatch on the plane, and the person behind me said, Peter is amazing. We spent ages talking about your channel, International Crew. That is hilarious. I've only had one person ever, and I don't even know if this counts because he was a mock trial student in Florida, but I've only had one person ever come up to me and say something or say that they've seen my channel. So you've had as many people say something about my channel as I have. That's hilarious. Monica, will they live stream the audio? Vote to follow. So they're not live streaming it, but what I've heard is they are going to make it available 24 hours later for a charge, which is just like trying to make it as hard as possible for the public to access this. But I'm sure someone will put it up there. I'm probably not going to listen to the whole thing. I might listen to parts of it. I'll listen to Nate. I'll read some live tweeting and reporting from it. Again, gruesome, grueling facts. So it's going to be difficult. I don't really want to dive into some of the grueling facts, but some of the interesting stuff and a lot of stuff we don't know yet will be interesting to see how it comes out at trial. And I will listen to some of the witnesses and maybe the openings and closings and things like that. Renee, can someone be struck because your ex was in prison? So they might not say it like that, but they can say, because of family experience, I am going to use a preemptory strike on her. Because maybe something you said about that experience, about like it wasn't fair what happened to your ex, or his sentence was too long, or the cops railroaded him, or his defense attorney sucked, or whatever, something about the process could make them potentially strike somebody because of something that their ex said or did. Yes, please hit that like button. Almost 2,000 in the chat. So let's get it up to 2,000 likes if you guys haven't hit it already. Crazy Cat Queen. Peter, I'm always down for whatever you can manage, but 2 of these cases might be rough for you. For me, the insanity defense focus on stock case is enough for me. I agree, and that's why I'm not going to watch wall to wall or gavel to gavel any of these cases. I'm going to catch parts. I'm going to discuss certain aspects of them, certain legal aspects. If the lawyers make a certain argument or objection or judge does something, I'm going to follow them enough so we can have those conversations. A lot of you have those questions in Zachary Anderson. I didn't follow it at all, so I wasn't able to answer it. So that's kind of how I'm planning on following these 2. I have a lot more background information on Lori Vallow because I've been following it for a while. Almost nothing on Letitia Stock, and that case is wild. We are going to talk about it in about 15 minutes. Question regarding striking jurors. Could you ask to exclude a juror if there's already too many people like them? That's a good question. Example, if 3/4 of the jury were men, could you exclude more men to prevent an imbalance? No. You cannot strike a juror based on their gender, regardless of what the jury makeup is. Now, could we sit at our table and say, there's a lot of men. Is this going to be something that's wrong with us? Which men do we like better than others? And then we can strike a juror purely because we like the juror that's going to come up behind them better. And we can say, Judge, we think juror number 12 is better than juror number 11, so we're striking juror number 11. We think they'll be more fair and imbalanced looking at this case. So that's one way it can be balanced. Terry, Peter, you work full-time and a family man, and you even come here when you are sick. I thank you so much for your honesty and dedication. Well, I have to be honest. You don't have to act like I'm doing some amazing feat or I'm some hero, but I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it. Nobody ever has to apologize for asking me to talk about these things. Nobody has to apologize for me coming and doing these videos. I'm doing it of my own volition. I enjoy it. I love talking to you guys about this case. I learned so much. I was actually talking to my dad, who was also talking about somebody who's been practicing criminal defense for 40 years, saying he is still learning things while watching these trials in a way that we've never really been able to watch them before, especially with juror interviews after the trial, because jurors talk to us sometimes after trial, but not every time. So we learn a lot listening to how the general public and how jurors watch and react to these trials and these arguments. I love getting your input, even if I disagree with it, even if it's harsh sometimes. I like it because I learn from it. Renee, when did they decide to try the case separately, and is that better or worse for them? I think it's better for them. They decided when all the speedy trial issues came just earlier this year. Lori Vallow demanded a speedy trial. Chad Daybell waived and was asking for a continuance. So there became an imbalance there. Nerd That Knits, welcome as a new member. And I know Azam asked yesterday at the end of the video if we were planning an April members only video. We are. John is working on the content for that and what specifically it's going to be. So if you want to reach out on Instagram or Twitter or on our YouTube community page with ideas, we are looking for the next big thing to do for the members. Usually it's not law related. Sometimes it is, but we like to keep those more kind of personal, fun hangouts for the members, behind the scenes stuff. Jesse Sue, what are your thoughts on Kay and Larry not being able to go in? So I haven't followed this storyline as much. A lot of you are asking me, but I do think that they should be considered victim family members and victims impacted by these crimes. I don't know if there's been a decision made that they're not. And I also don't know if they're not having them in the courtroom for purposes of there being enough room, or because jury selection is kind of a clunky process sometimes. And I don't know if they're going to be allowed in the courtroom during the actual trial. I don't have a big problem if they're not allowed in the courtroom during jury selection, but if they are allowed during trial. So we'll see if they're allowed in once opening statements begin. Johnny's girl. I hope we are not getting another Casey Anthony. I don't think we are. That's just my guess and my bet at this point. I think they've got a lot of evidence against Lori Vallow, but we'll see. We'll see because I haven't seen it come out in court yet. Molly, are Chad and Lori allowed to talk to each other? I think the answer is no. I think they filed a motion to be able to talk, and the judge denied it, if I'm remembering that correctly. That's my recollection at this point. Question from Aaron. Next members only. Can it be a reasonable time for international crew in the UK? I will try. I must admit it's difficult for me to pick the times. I fit them into my schedule when I have time because I've got a lot of stuff going on and I can't ever make anybody happy, unfortunately. But I try to get as many people as I possibly can. Kay and Larry aren't considered grandparents because of the adoption of JJ. I got to be honest. Judges can make decisions that allow them in the courtroom, and I think this judge should, but I don't know if they will. Mike, how are you liking the new Mizunos? What kind of driver do you use? I have the Stealth right now, the TaylorMade Stealth. I got to be honest. I'm not loving anything about my swing, but I am working with a YouTube golf coach who's got a big channel. Planning on talking more about that later once we officially get started. I've sent him some videos of my swing, so we're starting to work on some stuff. But we all are continuing to work, but it's a work in progress. I'm not loving anything right now. When I hit them well, I love them, but it's the swings problem at this point, not the equipment. Karen Hicks, Peter, do you ever hire professionals to help pick a jury or someone to read the perspective? I would say the answer to this is yes. Sometimes we do hire jury consultants. Sometimes we do hire companies that do, social media research or whatever it may be to help us get the best picture of the jurors that we can. Our goal is to best represent our clients. And now I do the voir dire where I talk to the jury. I ask them the questions. I like to have interaction with them. I like to get to know their vibes for them to get to know my vibes. I like to get off on the right foot with them. But we like to have different eyes. We like to have some non-lawyers sometimes as jury consultants come on and help us. So we do, not in every case, but in certain cases we will, especially if there are some different things that we want to get out of these cases, or we know that there are going to be issues that pop up. Crazy Cat Queen, also go Knowles. Ashley, judge has not ruled. Argument is Larry and Kay lost rights with adoption, so not family, and are also witnesses. Might allow after testimony. Okay, so the fact that they're witnesses, if the rule of sequestration is invoked, then they shouldn't be in the courtroom. Now, it's tough. That's a difficult call to make, but I do agree that if they are going to be witnesses, that they should sit outside the courtroom until they're done. Are folks like Bull real, and do you use them? So I haven't seen the show Bull. I don't ever trust or pick or use a jury consultant that says, I can just tell by the look in that person's eye or the way that person answered that question, that's what we're picking. Usually jury consultants are data driven, and they will build profiles that they think will be better or worse in the case based on the jury questionnaires, right? Everything you get, retired, married, not married, law enforcement, not law enforcement, have been a party to a case before, have been arrested, have not been arrested, have been a victim, have not been a victim, have been accused of a crime. So all that data they can put into systems and it can build up jury profiles, and that can really help. And I like them to help with the data more than reading people or hearing how people answer questions. Are jury consultants really worth the money? Some of them are. Some of them are also way more expensive than others. So I would say it depends. That's the famous answer from lawyers. Inevitable Honest. Do you think the death penalty being taken off the table was a good thing? So it wasn't taken off the table. The judge removed it. And I think it was a good thing for a few reasons. Number one, it's going to make the trial move quicker. Number two, there may not have been a difference in the practical application because they're behind on executions. They don't have enough of the drugs for the executions, and she may never have even got there. So why take all this extra time and money if, in fact, it was never going to happen? So I think that was important for the judge to take that into account as well. Question: how much can they ask about family members? That surprises me. So usually we don't want to know if your cousin's, sister's, husband's, ex-boyfriend's son was law enforcement, but any family members, what we usually draw the line on who you talk to regularly. Some people talk to their second cousins and hang out with them all the time. So I would want to know about that. Other people never see their grandparents. So if they never see, never talk, never knew their grandparents, it doesn't matter if their grandfather was a military person or whatever. So I think that, if you're close to them, if you talk to them, if you share war stories, if they've told you about investigations, if they told you what it's like to be a prosecutor, if they're a prosecutor, then that matters. And you're allowed to ask those questions if you think, as the lawyer, reasonably that it's going to let you know, can they be fair and impartial? That's the important thing. A lot of you recommending Bull. I think the main character in Bull is the same guy from one of my favorite legal shows that I think made my top 10 legal show list. If you want to check that out, I did a whole video on it, which was The Guardian. I think the main character from The Guardian is also the main character from Bull, which I thought the premise was like he calls bull on people, but I could be wrong. I'll have to check that. Yeah, Sandra said, like spouses, my husband is police. I never get picked. Yeah, I mean, if you live with it, it's tough for spouses to come home and never talk about work. Maybe he's like, these criminal defense lawyers are miserable. They're always trying to twist words and whatever. And whether, even if you want to be fair and impartial, maybe they think, I don't think she can get over it. Oh, bull for bullpen. Interesting. Okay. Jesse Sue, have you ever heard of a high profile case being so secretive? Yes, especially in federal court. And I don't know if I'd use the word secretive, but not out there. Unfortunately, yes. Oh, Bull was based on Dr. Phil's work before his show? I'm learning all sorts of new things. Yeah, people are still trying to get me to watch Game of Thrones. It just seems like such a mountain to climb that I don't know if I'm ready for it. Oh, Bull is from NCIS. Okay, maybe it's not the same guy. Bull was his name. The Guardian was Simon. Yeah, Simon Baker. That's the guy I was thinking of, but I guess it's not the same guy. Brother-in-law is a cop. I've been excused for that reason. Yeah. How about this? If you've ever been in the jury selection process and you got struck and you know why you got struck, let me know in the comments if you're watching as the Rewatch crew, or let me know now in the live chat the reason you got struck as a juror. If you know, or if you have a sneaking suspicion. My wife, who's on jury duty, by the way, I talked to some of the lawyers in the case afterwards. I saw him at a conference. Like we learned in the Alec Murdaugh case, we see each other at conferences, and they told me they saw my wife was on the jury. They didn't ask her any questions. They knew they were going to strike her. She sat there the whole time and they struck her. And your boy, the lawyer you know, Peter Tragos, yours truly, has jury duty on April 17th. And I would love nothing more than to get selected. Although I think that is not going to happen. That would be awesome. I would love to sit on a jury and report back afterwards, after the case was over, of course, and tell you about my time. Very interesting, I think. Oh, this is cool. Ashley's been chosen twice. NHL pen struck for being a deputy. Ruby, husband's law enforcement. Brother's law enforcement. Married to a cop. Brother is a judge, and I got picked 2 times. So they're like, hey, listen, her brother will tell her, you better be fair and impartial and not talk to anybody about this. Oh, Lynn. Yeah, this is the only time I ever feel bad in trial or for the jury, is when they're the alternate. And they've made the sacrifice. They're there doing their civic duty. It's tough. Ella B struck twice because she's a paralegal. No child care. That's what we call a hardship. Paralegal for public defender, Alita. Yeah. That'll get you struck on a criminal case. Sister is a police officer. Family member is a police officer. Ooh, interesting. Check kiting case, and I do accounting work. Ooh, retired clinical social worker, former DV victim. So my guess is one side probably wanted you, the other didn't. Brother-in-law's chief of police, never been struck, served on 2 juries. Were they civil or criminal? That's interesting. Interesting. Struck because you said some drug addicts can be rehabilitated, which is in fact a fact. Son was arrested 10 years before. It was a DUI case. Husband is a doctor and I manage his office. Must have been something to do with medicine in that case. Okay, The Mentalist is the one with Simon Baker. Okay. Brother is a lawyer, Liz. Struck due to clothes, Faith. Late 70s, I was in jeans and tie-dye. Lawyers are wild. Sometimes we're like, nah, I just don't think they're going to be good for us. And get kind of crazy in jury selection. You get a feeling sometimes. Victim of a crime. Jury duty on 424. All right. Carrie's a criminal defense lawyer. Got struck for that. Made it on a civil case once. It's awesome. And we have actually had a criminal lawyer on a civil lawyer on one of our criminal cases, which was interesting too. Because we actually think sometimes, even civil lawyers, they'll understand beyond a reasonable doubt and the presumption of innocence better, which is always interesting. Ooh, Winnett, struck as an insurance producer or risk manager. Hey, we've actually had people that work for insurance companies on some of our civil juries, and we've gotten some pretty good verdicts. And sometimes they were one of the really good ones for us because if it's a legit claim and they've seen all these terrible claims, sometimes they're like, no, this one's actually legit. Nicole has been chosen 2 times. Doesn't surprise me, Nicole. Very fair and impartial. Never called for jury duty ever. That's wild. Mary gets picked every time. A lot of family being in law enforcement. Wow. Picked once, fell asleep. Judge warned me to fine me $5,000. So I just saw in some case, a juror was filming on their phone, and I've got to wrap it up because we got to get to the Letitia stock. A juror was filming on their phone, and the judge sentenced them to 3 days in jail. They ended up only spending 5 hours in jail, but during jury selection, using their camera after the judge told them not to, violating a court order. Pretty wild. Boy, mom, do they ever allow attorneys on a jury? Yes. My coworker had one on his jury, and it sounded like the attorney took the lead juror role. That often happens. I thought it was strange that they let a lawyer on the jury. Many times they won't let a lawyer who is like the main lawyer, or like a criminal defense lawyer on a criminal case, but on a civil case, they might let him on, or vice versa. Let me see here for Nate. So I don't see that they have gotten their jury pool even of 42 yet. That's what it sounds like is the latest. All right. Turn on whatever you need to turn on to get redirected. We're going to talk Letitia stock for just a few minutes. If you want to come check that out. Apparently her husband is getting cross-examined right now, but he finished his testimony. There were some phone recordings we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about insanity and things like that. I appreciate you joining me. Hit that like button before you bounce. And then when we start that next video, don't forget to come hit the like button in there as well. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Tragos Law is our handle. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.